So I saw myself lying on the operating table with my ribcage open, and I could perceive the doctors around me. I heard them talking. They were under tension and said to each other, "Hurry up, come on, speed up a little bit. We have to get the little one through." They called me the little one. I'm not sure why. They encouraged and cheered on each other to give their all, so that they would make it. Well, they did it, luckily.
Frau Stein, Sie haben im Alter von 19 Jahren einen schweren Autounfall erlebt.
Ms. Stein, you experienced a serious car accident at the age of 19, which changed your life forever. You suffered life-threatening injuries and had a near-death experience while the doctors were fighting for your life. Would you please explain what happened back then?
Sure. 22 years ago, on the 24th of March 2000, I had a serious traffic accident. A truck hit me on the driver's side and then pushed me across the road into a side ditch and fell on top of my car. I was a mess. I had numerous life-threatening injuries. The worst injury was that the main artery at the heart was torn, as well as the lung. The spleen was ruptured, and I was in danger of bleeding to death internally. Therefore, I had to have an emergency surgery.
But luckily, you got to the hospital in time.
Yes, fortunately, everything went well, and I am able to sit here again. After 1 month only, I was out of the hospital already, but the aorta in the heart ruptured again, so I had to return to the hospital, which led to another heart operation. But this operation was supposed to completely change my life and my attitude towards it. During this heart surgery, I was clinically dead for 23 minutes, and during this time I had a near-death experience and was able to exit my body and get to know the other world, which we, or I, call heaven. It really changed my life completely.
You were given anesthesia before the surgery?
Yes, it was an open-heart surgery. I am not quite sure about how it worked, but I must have somehow floated upwards into this other world, into heaven, where I met my grandparents from my mother's side, whom I had only known from pictures up until that point. They then took me in between them and showed me their realm, as they called it. Among other things, they also led me to a place that was a very special one to me. It was a place from which I had the possibility to look down to earth. It seemed as if the floor at this place was made from glass. I then somehow had figured out that I only needed to think of people or of one specific person, and that was exactly the person I could then look down on at this moment. Obviously, I thought of my parents and my relatives. I saw them sitting in the little waiting room outside the operating room, holding each other's hands, hoping and praying that I was going to make it. Since they knew at that point that it was a very, very critical state where it wasn't clear if I was going to make it or not. During the near-death experience, I could also look down from a bird's eye view. So I saw myself lying on the operating table with my ribcage open, and I could perceive the doctors around me. I heard them talking. They were under tension and said to each other, "Hurry up, come on, speed up a little bit. We have to get the little one through." They called me the little one. I'm not sure why. They encouraged and cheered on each other to give their all, so that they would make it. Well, they did it, luckily.
During the operation, you could not only see the doctors, but also your relatives, and you witnessed how they were doing.
It was not difficult to tell how my parents or relatives were feeling, since they were crying, laying in each other's arms. Yes, of course I could feel and see how they were doing. But in that situation, when I saw them sitting there like that, it was impossible for me to reach them. I wished and hoped that I would be able to somehow let them know that I was doing well. But my hands were tied, and unfortunately I could not reach them. I was completely fine throughout the whole near-death experience. I had no pain, and no wounds were visible. In heaven, during this experience, I was healthy. I didn't have an open chest or was bleeding anywhere. I was healthy and well.
Did you feel like you had a body at all?
Yes, I experienced myself with a body in this situation. My body was wearing different clothes, though. Clothes that I didn't own at the time. I was wearing a floor-length light blue dress that I had never owned before. And I didn't wear any shoes. I was barefoot and had very quickly figured out why that was the case. First of all, the other people I could see there also had no shoes on. Secondly, there was a beautiful cotton wool-like soft ground beneath me, which was lukewarm, and it would have been a pity not to be able to feel that. Therefore, wearing shoes was superfluous there.
How did you perceive yourself? Did you look down at yourself, so to speak, or was that an overall perception?
I would say I didn't pay that much attention to that. I probably looked down at myself and saw that I wasn't wearing shoes, and I noticed this floor-length light blue dress. But that was it. It was okay, and I didn't look any further, or looked for a mirror to look at myself completely. I felt my body quite normally. It was simply dressed differently.
How did you experience this world? Was it something familiar?
Yes, I haven't seen this place before. Therefore, I wasn't familiar with it. But at the same time, it was so familiar to me, as if I had always been there, as if it was my home. I didn't feel uncomfortable or scared. I immediately felt thoroughly at ease in this really special place.
Somewhat like home?
Yes, one can really say that, although I had never been to this place before. But I immediately felt welcomed and at home.
You perceived your grandparents, whom you had not met before, only externally or also in their manner?
I have perceived my grandparents from my mother's side, just as I am perceiving you right here and now as a person with their bodies. They as well were so familiar to me, even though I haven't met them before. My grandfather saw me as a baby a few times before he died, but of course I lack any memory of that. And unfortunately, I was not able to meet my grandmother at all here on Earth. Both of them radiated so much joy and satisfaction. They were incredibly happy, as I was allowed to experience them there. They looked like they did in their last pictures, before their death. They haven't aged further or changed in any other way externally. They looked healthy and happy. And that's exactly how I experienced them. And I also spoke to them normally.
Did you also experience something like a review or evaluation of your own life?
Well, many near-death experiencers have had a life review. I did not experience that at no time during my 23-minute-long near-death experience. No, it somehow felt like I was a visitor there. I did feel very much at home there, but nevertheless, I also had the impression that I wasn't staying there, but rather just visiting for now.
How did the experience end?
In the end, my grandparents have kind of pushed me there. The near-death experience did not end suddenly, where I was back in my body at the recovery room. No, my grandparents had led me through their realm, and at some point, they said that I have to say goodbye to them now, and that I still have a big task to fulfill, which has already begun, but is by far not completed yet. They each gave me a kiss on the forehead and said, "Fulfill your task. We will meet again in many, many years." Even though that happened 22 years ago, I still remember this moment so well. I can literally feel my grandparents until this day. In that situation, I was so emotionally confused. I remember how I cried in that moment, because on the one hand, I was totally sad to leave them again, since I was just getting to know them for the first time. On the other hand, I cried tears of joy, since I was allowed to go back down to earth to my relatives. I know for sure that I had cried, and indeed, the surgeons were able to confirm this to me sometime after the operation, since I talked to them about my near-death experience. Apparently, I cried during surgery. I didn't sob or anything, but I really had tears running down my cheek, and regarding the time, it must have fit exactly into the situation.
Was it somehow noticeable to you what kind of task that might be?
Until this day, I am not sure what this task is supposed to be. My grandparents have not said anything further in this regard. No, unfortunately, they did not. But I must honestly say that I am not looking for this task either. Maybe the task is that I pass on my near-death experience to other people and thus help other people a little bit. That is something I could imagine, so that the fear of death, of dying, of what comes afterwards can be taken away to a certain extent. But on the other hand, it doesn't fit, because I hadn't started this task before this event, since I hadn't had a near-death experience before. Therefore, I'm still not sure what exactly this task is supposed to be. I think for me it means to work with people and tell them about my experience.
In the year 2000, near-death experiences were not yet very well known in general. Did you have some sort of experience or a special occasion that led you to the decision to talk about it?
No, I didn't decide to go into the media world and talk openly about my experience. Not at all. My mother was the first person whom I told about my near-death experience, because it was her parents, after all, whom I met. Then at some point, I began to write down my experiences and poems. And my parents, who were aware of that, said that I should turn that into a book. I thought, I can't write a book. How does that even work? I am not a writer, and I had no idea about how it works. But I, of course, kept thinking about it further. At one point, I thought, actually, why not? I decided to write absolutely everything down, and that's what I did. Not necessarily with the thought of writing a book and publishing it, but rather for the sake of completing it. I wanted to finish what I had written down so far and include everything that I had experienced. In the end, I was holding a script in my hand and thought, well, these are quite a few pages now. It could indeed become a book. I then had it bound in a copy store, and then went, with the book in my backpack, to a book fair and approached publishers.
And that worked out?
It had worked out, and it was printed, yes.
How did your parents react to what you told them?
I have to say that I got very lucky with my parents, my relatives, with my huge family in general. My mom definitely believes in near-death experiences, just like the others do. But my mom in particular has kind of a flair for such things, and immediately believed me when I told her about her parents, especially because I was able to tell her some details about her parents that she never told me. For example, that my grandmother always wiped a strand of hair from her face, even if there was no strand of hair. I told my mom about it, and she was able to confirm that this was indeed a habit of hers.
A pattern of behavior.
Exactly. My mom had never told me this before about her mom, about my grandmother. My other family members, relatives, and friends have also believed me immediately. But they were still a bit uncertain, I would say, because they themselves had not yet been confronted with this topic or had not even dealt with it before. Like you said, more than 20 years ago, it was not in the media at all. I did not consciously choose the path of going into the media world, into the public. I was called by a broadcaster that asked me whether I would give an interview, and that's how it happened. As a result, other broadcasters had seen the interview and then contacted me as well. I didn't say, well, I've now written the book, I've had this valuable experience, and now I want to go on television with it. It happened almost by itself.
From today's perspective, what you did back then was pioneering work, even if you didn't aim for it. But de facto, that's what it was.
Of course, I had to expect that a lot of people would call me crazy and say that those are probably after effects from all the drugs or something. But I didn't care, even if it would have been like that. I'm sure some people even thought, yeah, sure, go ahead, we don't believe you. They certainly did. Fortunately, these people didn't approach me. Maybe it could have discouraged me and made me think that nobody believes me anyway, and I would have ended there and then. I was lucky that it wasn't like that, but quite the opposite. I had a lot of support. Friends who said, wow, I've never heard of that before. And even if it's hard to imagine, I do of course believe you. Why would you make anything up and tell me a lie? These reactions have encouraged me to go on and further into the public to tell more about it.
Seems like you already are fulfilling a task. Let's go back to your near-death experience. Were you able to subsequently verify your observations of the surgeons, what they said and so on? Did you talk to them about it?
Yes, I actually have. I am not sure how much time had passed, but it was some time after my experience. Of course, it took me a long time until I was kind of fit and on my feet again. I talked to these surgeons when I went back to the hospital for a follow checkup. And I was very lucky again, because I actually reckoned that the doctors, who want to have everything explained and think abstractly, would say, yes, Mrs. Stein, we can explain that to you. It was simply the medication. The anesthesia drugs can trigger something like that. But that was not the case at all. They said, yes, we believe you. They were almost embarrassed when they realized that I could report to them how they lovingly grumbled at each other to hurry up.
You told them frankly what you'd heard?
Yes, just as it was. Of course, they felt a little embarrassed. It was obvious according to their reactions. But they agreed and said that they can imagine it, since I was not the first person to tell them something like that. They believed me straight away.
What was your ideological orientation before your near-death experience? Were you religiously, spiritually oriented?
I had never had such a special experience with consciousness to date, and also not yet heard of it either. I was 19 when the accident happened, and in the middle of life. I believed the priority in my life at the time was to party and to meet friends. I just said that I had never heard of consciousness experiences before that, but I guess I actually had heard of a near-death experience. Even though I believed that too, I kind of lacked the evidence. Apparently, I was supposed to collect it myself. Now I know what I have experienced, and even if it happened 22 years ago, it still feels like it was yesterday, every time I talk about it. It was etched in my mind. And I've reached a point in the meantime where I can say that it's a part of me, a part of my life. It has changed me and my attitude towards life, and I am glad that it is like that. I don't want to say that it was good that I had the accident, but I do not know where I would be today without this experience. Maybe I would live my life unconsciously nowadays and take everything for granted, which I do not do at all because of this experience. I really know now how precious my life or the life of any living being is. And I am really grateful for every day, grateful to God, which leads me back to your question. I have a Christian upbringing, but I don't go to church every Sunday. When I was younger, in my teens, I used to have to go to church with my parents. But I mostly waited around and spent more time looking at the clock when it was finally over so that I could go again, rather than dealing with faith itself, with the church. However, after this experience, I can say quite clearly that I believe in God and I pass this faith on to my children. What they make out of it later is up to them, but I try to lead them a little bit in that direction.
But your faith was deepened by the conviction that there is life after death, that life is something greater, something more comprehensive, and not by a specific experience of God.
No, I have not had an experience of God. I think that God cannot be identified as a figure, as one person. In my opinion, God is everywhere. He is also here with us now. He accompanies us. And therefore, He also accompanied me during my near-death experience. I would say that even though one cannot see His power, He is still present. And I feel like that I have been in a more intense contact with God ever since my experience. I consciously pray and ask God to continue to protect us, protect my family. And hopefully He can help so that soon there will be peace again. At the same time, I am always extremely grateful. I thank God as well, very, very much for every new day. Because I now know that every new day is indeed a gift. I have experienced that it can be over very quickly, or that it could have been over. Therefore, no matter how bad, quote-unquote, some days are, If one is annoyed or any external influences are negative, one can still think, I am able to live. I get to experience the rain that some people call bad weather. I am allowed all that again. I am at least able to be annoyed in the winter when I have to drive behind a snowplow and I'm late for an appointment. I used to get angry about that too and was then upset that I could not reach an agreed appointment on time. But now I think, oh, I get to experience everything that I might have been annoyed and upset about in the past.
You also get to experience all the emotions.
Yes, I am really able to experience and also allow all the emotions.
Your near-death experience changed you deeply on the inside. But how did things continue physically over the decades? Is everything fine today?
Of course, it took me a long time to recover after the accident. I was also in a wheelchair for a while because I had such a damaged pelvic floor. And I was obviously weakened after the accident overall. I was in the hospital for quite some time, and I was also in an artificial coma. It took me a while to really gather my own strength again. Yes, and actually everything went well until 22 years after the accident. Last year, right where the main artery in the heart was torn, an aneurysm formed at the suture point. It was detected last summer, which led to another surgery. It took a few months, though, until I found a clinic that was willing to do it. Ultimately, this planned heart surgery took place at the end of October in 2021. It was a difficult heart surgery, just as it was announced beforehand. It was supposed to be a complicated operation, but fortunately I once again had 1,000 guardian angels and the best surgeon who managed this operation perfectly. 1 week after this heart surgery, I was released from the hospital already, and that alone was a success for me, a victory. I had to deal with death, of course, once again, beforehand.
Since it was a life-threatening operation.
Exactly. Therefore, I had done one can call it, farewell tour. I really lived life again. I met friends since they wanted to meet me again because we haven't seen each other in a long time. I didn't revive old friendships, but we have simply seen each other again. My best friend and her little son came from Bonn, and I met a lot of other people who were simply close to my heart. I got a whole box full of good luck charms. And many dear friends wrote me letters and have attached small notes to the good luck charms that said, "You can do this, Tina. You are strong. We believe in you and God supports you." That was very nice. I think it couldn't have ended badly after all of that.
And that's how it was.
Yes. Of course, fear played a part in it still. It was a heart operation, and it was almost worse for my family than for me. I have 2 small children, and I still remember everything very clearly. In the morning, when I went to the hospital, I said goodbye to my children. I took my oldest daughter to the bus stop and gave her a kiss. I took my little daughter to the kindergarten and, well, said goodbye to her. Of course, I didn't tell them that Mommy may die, but they knew that I will have heart surgery. I only spoke positively of it and said, "After approximately 2 days, you can perhaps visit Mommy again, and I will be well again, even though I will still be in pain, because they have to cut me open. I have explained it in that way, since they have asked me about it. Nevertheless, the day of the farewell was understandably tough. I was lucky that my parents drove me to the hospital together. That has always shown me the family cohesion. My parents are divorced, but still get along great. They drove with me to the hospital and said goodbye to me there. On the day of the operation itself, my husband and my brother were on guard. They came to the hospital very early in the morning. They made lunch packages together and took things with them to keep them busy, just to be near me in the hospital during the surgery. They were then, of course, informed about the great outcome of the operation afterwards. That was the greatest thing for me. First of all, to know that so many people are with me mentally in this situation during the operation. People who have lit candles and prayed for me. And then, of course, my husband and brother, who were in the same building as me during the situation. That was so beautiful and couldn't have been done better by my family.
Do you have the feeling that today everything is finally over?
I wish, but I'm still a little unsure. Something had been the trigger that my lung vessels bled. On the 15th of December, just as I was in the bathroom with my kids and got them ready for school and kindergarten in the morning, I suddenly spat blood. And not just a bit. I was gushing, and my children were standing next to me and noticed it. Then I came to the hospital, but was released again after 2 days, because no one could say specifically what the trigger for this blood cough was. I came home and thought everything was okay again. I was released on Friday, and on Monday, I once again coughed blood. Again, the same situation in the morning as I was getting the children ready in the bathroom, and once again the ambulance drove me to the hospital. The bleeding has then stopped by itself. The vessels have probably closed themselves again, quite quickly even, and the blood cough stopped. The doctors were then again clueless about what was going on. So then they came up with the idea that on the following day, some nuclear medical examination should be done on the lungs in order to see where it was bleeding, which vessels were affected. The doctor told me that late in the afternoon, and about 2 hours later, I was on the phone with my husband and my children. During this phone call, I coughed blood again. But this time it was a lot more. It looked like a battlefield, and I spat blood all over the doctors and the nurses, and I immediately apologized for it. I felt good. I mean, I had no pain, no circulatory problems. Every time I coughed blood, I felt good. I'm also glad that I was at least conscious every time that happened and able to remember it. After this renewed, really heavy cough, I was then taken to the operating room. First, a plug was inserted, kind of a balloon in the lungs, which should stop the bleeding for now. That worked out, and with it, I was able to survive the night. At the same time, the physicians had more time to consult a little further. The next morning, on the 21st of December, the lung surgery was carried out, which lasted 7 hours, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. My husband was called in the morning and was told that if he wants to see me one more time, he should please come to the hospital. He then said goodbye to me, and I was operated. Everything went well. The left lobe had to be removed completely. Sounds dramatic, and it indeed was dramatic. But I am back now. I made it again, and I'm so thankful to all the surgeons, all the doctors, and my family. Obviously, I would not have survived without the surgeons' assistance and commitment, and certainly not without my family's faith in me, and also my faith in God. I am once again allowed to live a new life, and I don't even know how much more is going to happen. I cannot live my life even more intensely than I already do. I hope and pray and wish that that was it now, that nothing more needs to be done. Originally, another heart surgery was planned in order to make sure that no more afterbleeding will occur, but that has now been revised again. We all believe and hope, and that includes the surgeons, on nature, that the time will heal the wounds. Thus, with each day where I don't cough any blood, I am gaining more and more security in this process.
I wish you the same. Thank you very much, Ms. Stein, for your openness. I think you inspire a great many people as to how to manage difficult situations. Thank you very much for this interview.
With pleasure. Thank you as well.